Transparency in advertising and more marketing communications generally is a really hot topic right now. And this is a webinar for Cambridge Marketing College to help you avoid the greenwashing trap. I'm Neil Wilkins. In this session today, we're going to look at how you can embed transparency, credibility, and responsibility into advertising and communications to build trust and meet sustainability standards. That really is the essence of effective, responsible marketing and communications right now. So we're going to look at some of the strategic frameworks, some of the tools, and I've got a couple of little checklists for you that you really will need to design transparent campaigns and avoid any of the potential pitfalls with regard to greenwashing. Now, why does this matter right now? Well, it is really, really important according to so many pockets of research. According to the Edelman Trust Barometer, 64% of consumers say trust is their top reason for buying from a brand. Now, if you just think about that, that's 2/3 of customers say trust is their top reason for choosing a specific brand. So it isn't about the product, it's not about the service, it's not about the brand styling, or even, as contrary to many people believe, the price. It is actually trust. So trust is a significant factor that we're going to need to consider as we go through this. And we're also seeing a tightening of rules around misleading sustainability claims in marketing and communications. And as those rules tighten, transparency, honesty, and responsible marketing and communications becomes key. So transparency in advertising is now both a competitive advantage as well as a compliance requirement. So it's a non-negotiable, it is compulsory. And isn't it incredible how so many organizations are really not paying too much attention to this right now? And that is what we're going to do as we go through this session. So let's get one thing clear right from the outset. What do we actually mean by this term greenwashing? Okay, so it is about making unsubstantiated or misleading claims about the environmental impact of your activities, of your product, of your brand, or of your service. So vague language, something like, oh, we're eco-friendly, selective disclosure, or even, really, it could be false certifications, are greenwashing. And the key here is that word unsubstantiated, because a lot of organizations don't set out to do greenwashing. They don't set out to be bad. And I'm sure if you're sat here listening to this, you're not thinking, oh, yeah, I'm going to really kind of try and sort of, fool everybody. We don't actually aim for that, but we can still fall into the greenwashing trap because we don't have substantiated evidence that backs up the claims that we're making. A good example here for a brand that was criticized for insufficient evidence of its claims was H&M's Conscious collection. Do a little bit of research if you want to get deep into that one. So it can happen to brands small, medium, and large. Doesn't matter what sector you're in. Greenwashing is a potential hazard, if you like, in terms of your marketing planning. So where does this actually happen, and why is this both tactically important in the decisions you make when you're making claims, building propositions, looking to do campaigns, and the more strategic, higher level planning that we do probably a little less frequently? Well, John Elkington's model, people, planet, and profit, the triple bottom line, as it's also called, requires us to balance sustainability claims with measurable business outcomes. And that is transparency. So if you claim something and you've got the evidence to back it up that says, actually, that's the truth, actually, that is evidence and substantiated stuff that you're talking about, then you are compliant. And the strategic implication, of course, is to avoid things like, oh, planet only messaging without people or profit context. In other words, just going for one of those three elements of the triple bottom line. So we're all about our people and we put people first and then ignore the other two. Or, as many organizations do, they chase after the profit, forgetting the impact on stakeholders and the planet around them. So this triple bottom line is a lovely little, very simple little kind of reminder to us all that actually there's a lot of stuff going on. We are going to be pulled in different directions, and it's important if we want to avoid the greenwashing trap to consider all angles. So this word transparency, I've been using it quite a bit and will continue to do through this talk. What are we actually kind of talking about and where do we see it? Well, basic compliance, if you want to be transparent and you just want to be compliant, is just following the regulation. So you do a little bit of research in your sector for what is the compliant level. In other words, what's the lowest kind of bar that we need to get over? And that would really be just basic compliance. You're not really pushing things, you're not really testing yourself, you're just doing the bare minimum. And you could kind of argue that for some brands and some marketers, that might be okay. But for those who really want to push this forward and become more competitive and actually future proof, there's more you can do. Another thing you can do at the next level is proactive disclosure. So you can actually share data openly. So when we talk about the evidence to back up your claims, you can actually be quite proactive in sharing it. In other words, if you've done some research that says, look, we're making this claim about our packaging or about how we've sourced this widget to make this product, if you then have that information or that evidence, put it into the public domain. Proactive disclosure saying, look, we're not perfect. We're not claiming to be perfect, but we're on a journey and we're actually doing some good stuff. And here's the evidence to demonstrate it. Sharing data openly is transparent. Third-party validation. And this one, in terms of avoiding greenwash, is really, really good because certification and verification really help you to say, look, it's not just us saying it, it's not just our evidence. Actually, we've got this badge of honor from this organization here. B Corp is a really good example. There are many others, and we'll look at these a little bit later. But some kind of validation from a third party, somebody else who isn't you. And obviously, if they've got some level of credibility, then a certificate or some kind of verification that you're doing a good job, you actually are making gains here. That third party validation is a great level of transparency. So see if there's something you could do there. Consumer empowerment is the next level up, which enables informed choices. In other words, actually sharing the reviews, the background story, the evidence that we've just talked about, and actually allow those reviews to be in public. Actually look and show the journey of your product life cycle, for example. So starting to really empower your customers to a level where they can really make informed choices because, okay, they might look at your evidence, they might look at your certification and think, okay, that's pretty good. But actually, this brand over here, they're kind of the stuff that they're talking about is a bit more aligned with me, kind of feels a little bit more, yeah, transparent in my way, I would describe it. And then they're going to go over there. So actually enabling them to kind of justify their decisions and their engagement with your brand is a really good one because that's proper informed choice and decision making. And then, of course, the highest level really is what we might term radical transparency, full traceability. And it really is only the very, very highest level brands at the moment who are kind of really going for this full bore. Brands like, as we always hear, Patagonia, for example, total transparency. I mean, really radically positioning their green credentials and all the evidence behind it so that they can really trade and actually, have that as a currency, if you like, in terms of their customer engagement. So it isn't about saying if you don't go that level, you're not doing a good job. It is a journey. All of this stuff is a journey. No brand ever has yet been fully transparent. No brand has actually totally and utterly cracked this challenge. So it is a journey. It is something that you can say we're going to commit to. We're going to set some targets. We're going to set some key performance indicators and see if we can improve. And the more we improve, the more we share. The more we share, the more we become transparent. And that is a good thing. It's almost like business vulnerability. If you look at it at a surface level, it's about saying, we're going to open this up for scrutiny. Yeah, we know we're not perfect, but actually we're going to give this a good go. And as long as you do that, most customers or prospects will look at this, and most business partners, in fact, most stakeholders will look at it and say, good on you. We can see that you're being honest because you're saying you're not perfect. And yeah, you aren't because look at what you've given us. But Well done for kind of giving this a go. You're very less likely to be challenged if you're that brutally honest with yourselves and then with the world. So how would this stuff start to play out in terms of we're focusing in here on what we might call advertising, because a lot of the time the criticism and the greenwashing comes through when brands are overtly promoting. Okay, so this does apply to your broader marketing communications. So that's the good news is that it applies everywhere. But in terms of advertising, this is where it's a big pointy stick and it can really hurt if you get it wrong. So that's why we're focusing at probably the most poignant moment here in comms. So the advertising position. So we've got a checklist here which can highlight a number of things to think about. So the relevance of the claims, ensuring that sustainability claims are material to your product or service. So not woolly and vague, but very precisely focused on the thing that you're saying you're promoting. The evidence needs to be robust and verifiable data. So if you've got some test figures, if you've got some performance data, any kind of analysis that you can put in there, spreadsheets to full-on reports, that's the evidence. It needs to be robust. Clarity is a key one, avoiding jargon and using very accessible language. The way I'm describing this, I'm trying to describe this to you in a very kind of open sort of way. I'm not using any kind of industry terminology. I'm just trying to talk in very plain English. And that is the key for not falling into the greenwashing trap, is avoiding jargon, anything that could be misinterpreted or, more importantly, misunderstood. That is key. So very accessible language is important here. And again, that's transparent, isn't it? Because the more honest we are, there's no kind of smoke and mirrors. There's no kind of shadows in which your messages are trying to hide to try and get away with stuff. This is really openly, bluntly true, and that's key. And the fourth point here is very much about impact. So showing the measurable difference that a piece of packaging that you now actually use versus the old version, and that tangible evidence of the difference that is measurable and is actually palatable, palpable, if you like, for the customer. That's really important. So the impact of what you're doing is as important as the data behind it. So help people to understand what it is you're sharing, and that will certainly help you avoid falling into the trap. Now, I said a little bit earlier that some of this stuff can be at a tactical level, sort of as you're doing campaigns and putting ads out, but it can also be at a higher level. One of the most successful things you can do, or the most productive things that you can do, is to align your campaigns with the SDGs, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And the reason we say that is because often when you kind of see a claim, and if it is a slightly dubious, or maybe it is a claim that does need this substantiation behind it and the evidence, often if a customer or a supplier or another stakeholder in the organization or around the organization sees a claim that you're making, if they can hook that onto something that they already know and they already feel confident with, it's like, oh, okay, now you've given me the context. So it could be, for example, in the example that I'm going to mention here, Unilever's Dove Self-Esteem Project, which was very clearly aligned to SDG, Sustainable Development Goal 5, which is gender equality. And the kind of that hook, if you like, for all the claims Unilever were making in that particular project were aligned to something higher, something a little bit more kind of macro and strategic, so that any customer seeing that could think, even if it's subconsciously, oh, okay, great. Yeah, I can see where you're going with this. So there's a nice role that the SDGs can play here because they give a context to the claims you're making. And that can certainly help almost sort of soften the landing of any poignant messages that you might want to make. So giving the context and those nuances is really important. And it does, of course, if you're thinking at a strategic sustainability level, it means that all the claims must really be reflecting your entire product life cycle. So everything that you're saying must be applicable throughout the product life cycle and also across the whole customer journey. So thinking about, if we make this claim, can we find some evidence, maybe even if we could get it third-party verified, that show that we're sourcing in the best way, that our production is with best endeavors, that the use of the project, or the product rather, or the service is, being done diligently, and the disposal afterwards is absolutely key. You've only got to change, for example, your broadband supplier. And the first thing your broadband supplier will do is actually try and take back the old hardware. So the old hub and maybe a phone that you've got and some cables and chargers and this, that, and the other from the old supplier. And actually, what they might do is they'll charge you for the new kit if you don't send it back. That's responsible disposal. So actually encouraging people to actually recycle, upcycle, and whatever it is that is appropriate to your brand and your campaign and your products. So it is the full life cycle from start to finish, sourcing to disposal. And this is a really important thing to consider. We see lots of examples, and it's great to kind of try and find examples of brands in your own world. Obviously, I've just talked about the broadband one there. That's really poignant to me right now because we've just changed suppliers. But people like IKEA, circularity in their communications is backed by product repair and recycling services. So actually practicing what they preach. There's no chance, really, if you're showing best endeavors and you've got a full service across the whole life cycle of the product that you're promoting or advertising, there's pretty much no way you could be challenged because you're being honest, ethical, transparent, and true. So, backing up the claims with real world stuff is really important. And so, how could we dovetail in here then stuff that we would normally be doing as a marketer, for example, if we were doing some marketing planning? So, a lot of us are using SOSTAC as a model, a framework to do planning of strategies, marketing plans, campaigns, and projects. So, we could dovetail that in with or use that as an overlay for avoiding the greenwashing trap. So, there's a transparency overlay here, which could be quite interesting to consider the next time you're planning something, because you can use this as a checklist and see where you are and what you might want to improve. So, situation from SOSTAC is, well, what's the material? Objectives could be what are our commercial, but also societal goals. The strategy could be, can we ensure credibility as we take this project forward? The tactics would be, as we've been talking about, transparent messaging. Might be different to the way we've done it before. Let's test it. The action will almost certainly be governance and training, so getting everybody involved and measuring and monitoring the performance of the project against these new kind of guidelines. And then control, the final C in SOSTAC, in that acronym, is independent verification. So, yeah, measuring the campaign or the project that we've just done, of course, because that's what we do. So, the metrics and the analysis, but actually taking that to maybe some kind of third party or some kind of independent. It could be internally, but it could be, one of your suppliers or stakeholders, and actually take them through the process and say, how is this actually looking from your perspective as an outsider? And how is this different to what we've done before? Because this could be very powerful in the way you take this stuff forward, not just avoiding a greenwashing trap and doing it in a defensive way, but proactively looking to improve all of your processes and the way that you do it. And by doing this, of course, I've used the phrase already, kind of future proofing and actually positioning yourself and aligning this kind of more responsible marketing approach with just doing good business practice. And of course, from a regulatory context, this positions you really well. You only have to look down some of the regulations here, the ASA's UK guidance on environmental claims, for example, the CMA's Green Claims Code, which is an often quoted one that's definitely well worth looking, the EU's Green Claims Directive, which is a more recent regulatory framework that, again, really helps us to understand the implications, but also what we can do about this stuff so that we can actually future proof our projects, our campaigns, our strategies, and the way that we do our marketing, not just for today, but into the future. This is kind of refining and reinventing how we've done it in the past to do more responsible communications. Because if we don't do that, what are some of the common greenwashing pitfalls? Well, they're pretty obvious, I guess, if you're kind of still following me at this stage in terms of all the good stuff. Because if you do the good stuff, you're less likely to overclaim. Things like stating, well, we're going to be carbon neutral or we are carbon neutral, that woolly phrase, is not the same as net zero. Carbon neutral has a kind of a much more sort of generic and vague set of assumptions behind it, whereas net zero is tangible and can be measured. Another pitfall is cherry picking one positive attribute and saying, hey, and I've used the example of packaging. Hey, look at our packaging, it's incredible. But then hiding the actual what's in the box, which actually isn't eco-friendly, for example. Whereas you're making claims that your packaging is, but the product inside isn't. So that would be cherry picking one positive thing almost to cover up or to kind of put people off the scent. That is greenwashing. Using imagery or colors to imply sustainability without the proof to back it up. I'm sure, like I have, you've seen a lot of examples where you've almost been kind of duped into thinking, oh, this one's healthy, and particularly with food. Do you find it with food as well? It's one of those things, it's kind of not directly sustainability, but it kind of yeah, it's a similar kind of process I think that some brands go through. They dress the product up, particularly on the packaging, to look super healthy. And then you check the ingredient, it's like, oh my Lord, look how much sugar's in that. Well, that's not super healthy. And yet the product packaging, the colors, the imagery, the tone of voice, the style makes it seem like part of your healthy diet. So that would be a really extreme example that we would see in everyday life. So maybe it's time to look in the mirror. Maybe look at your stuff and think, oh, there's some of the stuff in here that we do actually implying things that we don't actually have evidence to back up, or have we kind of almost fallen into the trap without realizing it? It's very easy to do if you don't pay attention. So that's a nice one to kind of really focus on. And also over relying on future goals instead of current progress. I've always been a huge advocate of sharing the journey. If you don't have on your website an area that is about your sustainability journey, it's a great thing to add because you can always refer people to it. And it is that honesty that says, no, we're not there. No, we're not 100%. And we admit it. We're almost proud of the fact this is an ongoing, continuous journey of improvement. We're not waiting until we're 100%. We are delivering stuff that is imperfect, but we're honest about it and we're showing what we're trying to do. And have you got any ideas of how we can improve this and how we can increase this? Collaboration and ideas from your audiences can be a great way of avoiding some of those pitfalls. And so, what we need to do really is to get some kind of step by step process, don't we? So, we've got an implementation framework here that you can follow literally step by step. It's not too many steps, but it does get you started on this and it does enable you to kind of, yeah, really audit and benchmark where you are. And that is step one. So audit your current claims before you begin anything else. Map all advertising claims across all of your channels. And you can test against the Cambridge Marketing College checklist on the sustainability toolkit, which you can get on the Cambridge Marketing College site. You see it down in the footer. You can go to the sustainability area and download the toolkit. And that will identify some high potential risk areas that you need to attend to first. So that's going to be key and important, obviously. Step two then is to look for evidence and verification. So can you gather some product lifecycle data? You're not looking for perfect, remember here, but actually work with suppliers, for example, to validate the sourcing of the widgets or the ingredients that go into making your product. And where you can obtain, if you don't already have them, some kind of certification. The obvious ones that we see day to day are things like Fair Trade and B Corp, but there will probably be something that's relevant to your product or service. So do the deep research and find out, maybe from your competition, what kind of certification would be appropriate. So that's step two, gathering the evidence and the verification of the things you're doing. Step three then is communication design. I've said a few times here, use plain language and be super specific. You know, packaging is 70% recycled plastic, not this is sustainable packaging. You know, so don't use those vague throwaway comments just because it's easier. Well, one, it's lazy, and two, you can't really back it up, can you? So actually be precise, even though 70% might not be your goal. Maybe you're looking to move it to 80% or even higher. Currently, that is a fact, so be specific. And provide links or QR codes, for example, for detailed impact reports. I mean, share that journey that, yeah, okay, currently our packaging is 70% recycled plastic, but look, here's our journey as we move towards 75%. Now, some people might look at that and say, okay, yeah, I'll kind of give you the benefit of the doubt. You're clearly trying. So that's kind of good. You're not kind of over egging the claims and you're kind of obviously on a journey. So I'll kind of rest into that. That's fine. I can kind of share the fact that you're being honest with me. And that probably for most of us right here, right now, is enough. Step four then is let's get some governance in place. It's a big, bold word, but actually, it's all about accountability. This is about accountability for the things that you are going to improve and some kind of sign off. So, introducing some sustainability checkpoints in maybe the creative review process, for example, of your advertising or your comms activity. And this applies obviously to organic content as well as paid media. If you require a sign off from legal or your ESG team, if you have a sustainability lead in the business, then all sustainability claims need to be checked out and literally approved. So tick boxes and some kind of checklist to make sure that if you're claiming stuff, it's been signed off. Now, you might be in an organization that's trying to avoid having technical teams or kind of these kind of sign off processes, but it is so, so important. Yes, it might involve an extra hour in the whole planning process, but it is so valuable if you can do it. And also, of course, as part of that, documenting the evidence for each campaign, for each claim, for each ad, and for each channel. So just having some backup, if you like, because you will at some point be challenged. You just will. I mean, this is just the way of the world right now. And isn't it going to be better that you can put your finger on the folder in which you've got all the backup information and evidence? I know that would be a safer and happier place for me if I was doing it. So I would encourage you to look at that too. And then the final step is the monitoring and evaluation. Track what happens. Again, I'm making these kind of bold claims that as long as you share the journey and as long as you're open and transparent, it's going to be okay. But track the customer sentiment on the claims that you're making. There are tools available, and I'm sure some of you are going to be using these at the moment. Talkwalker, Brandwatch, other customer sentiment tools that you can kind of watch how people are talking about you in social media and beyond, and monitor competitor claims to benchmark yourself, because very quickly, if you start really rolling this out, you become probably best in class, probably best in your sector. And you can feed the lessons that you learn and that relative positioning against your competitors into future campaigns. So it's a cyclical process. You don't just do this the once, you get to step five and you go back to step one for the next campaign, run it through, back to step one again at the end of that one. And so it's a rolling cyclical process that will hopefully continually improve everything that you do. And there are many organizations, one that I've already mentioned, Patagonia, and many others that you can do your research if there are any in your sector or close to your industry, and beyond. There are many that are doing really, really powerful stuff here and avoiding the greenwashing trap. They're doing transparency with limitations, they're doing radical transparency, and they're doing advertising through carefully crafted actions. And it is about evidence. The more I talk about this, the more you hear me say the word evidence, backing up, substantiated claims, third party verification. These are the key phrases that I really, really want you to be almost obsessing about when you're doing your campaigns and your advertising and your promotions. Because if you get into this as a really good habit, it is almost that you are just going to be the best in class. You're going to be the best of the best. It just is that way now. It's really important. And there are tools to help you en route. There's ways that you can do this, with a bit of assistance. So transparency tools are things like AdGreen, EcoChain, and Good Loop. They all have slightly different kind of perspectives and specialities, but they're well worth having a little look at. So do a little bit of research around those tools and see if any of those kind of ring true for the needs that you have as you're doing your audit and you're trying to roll this out. And of course, you can, as always, you can add your AI, your favorite AI, into the mix and see if there's anything that it can suggest or it can support you as you're increasing the level of transparency here. AI can obviously analyze things like your supply chain data and, of course, sentiment at scale. Tools like Clarity AI, Savest, or Sustainabase are all there in support of your initiative. So you don't have to think, oh, Neil, yeah, it's all great you're saying this, but it's complicated. Actually, at its basics, it's very, very simple, to be honest. And these tools help you to kind of get over the line and start to do stuff really, really quickly and efficiently. So it doesn't have to be complicated. So I would advocate keeping it very, very simple if you can. That's really important, and embedding this stuff as best you can into your brand strategies. So link sustainability claims to a higher level corporate purpose that you might have. Ensure that your advertising and comms more generally sit within a consistent sustainability narrative. And as part of your audit, just look and see when and where have we ever talked about this before. And if you never have, it's about building this long-term approach to build resilience against any kind of risk of getting caught out. But it's also about almost sharing a new, fresh way of talking about what you do. And as I said right at the outset, this is a new currency for many brands. They're actually trading now in their sustainability credentials and the journey that they're on. It isn't just about our product does this, our service does that. Here's how much you pay. Do you want to buy it? That's very, very old school. This actually comes in as a new currency, a new way that you can communicate what you do. And it's very motivating and very engaging for your target audience. And so, what we need to really see is a little bit of a roadmap, I guess, to kind of, and again, it's another little checklist. One of these hopefully is going to ring true for you. And you're going to say, oh, okay, that's the one that matches where I am. That's the one that kind of really gives me an opportunity here to kind of take this thing forward. And it's going to be then kind of almost creating a sort of a workflow, if you like. And I'm going to sort of share that with you in just a second. But here's a kind of a more strategic sort of roadmap that is maybe your high level before you then come down to the tactical level workflow. So if you were creating something as a little bit of a presentation, maybe to try and get others on side, because probably isn't going to just be you alone, is it, who's going to try and roll this out? Then this is your probably 6-step checklist as a roadmap of the journey you want to go on. So auditing claims, applying the checklist that I've talked about before from the CMC toolkit, aligning maybe your campaigns with an SDG or two, gathering evidence and third-party validation, making sure your governance and the sign-off checklists are in place, and monitoring performance and refining as you go. Not all of this stuff is going to win, certainly not first time out, but the fact you're doing the roadmap, the fact you're on the journey and sharing it transparently, that is the key. Just getting started at the moment is probably for many of us enough. That probably is going to be a good step forward. So then when we start to build a workflow, this is what I would suggest that we could be focusing in on here. And there's a number of stages of the workflow that I just want to take you through. So stage one, and this is going a little bit deeper into that earlier one that we were just kind of highlighting. So stage one could be situation analysis and an audit. And the output for that will be kind of some sort of risk register and potential identification of greenwashing issues. So really key that you're going to be asking the claims, is the claim material to the product or service, or is it a little bit generic and woolly or peripheral? So that's what you're asking in the audit. So you look at your claim, you think, okay, is this absolutely pinpoint accurate? And what are the potential risks that we're actually not saying the right thing in our checklist? Step two, then, or stage two, is defining some objectives. So, what we're looking to do here is setting these dual objectives, something that's commercial and something that's a little bit more societal. Remember that triple bottom line that I talked about before. So, the output potentially then is smart objectives linking business and environmental social impact goals. So it is commercial, yes, still want to make money, still want to be advertising to sell product and service, but doing it in the right way, because the goals now and the smart objectives also have impact goals aligned with them. Stage three, at strategy development, collecting and validating supporting data. So what you're doing is you're building that little pot of information and data. So you're getting some nice folders, one for each campaign, and you're using it as a data repository. And you're collecting references to underpin the campaign messaging. And this is where you've really got to pay attention because, yeah, obviously you're still doing the same sort of traditional Digital probably approaches to market through all the channels that you would have always done. But this is this new filter, this new layer that sits on top of all of it. So you're adding this into your strategic development of your campaign flow. That's important. Stage four then is the creativity and the messaging. This is where we need to translate the technical data into clear, plain language. So, yes, you do want to sell. Yes, you want a great strapline. Yes, you're probably using AI to at least partially create your content and your campaign stuff. And that's all good. But making sure that what you're saying is actually then aligned with the output of some really, really carefully tested copy, which is tested against the clarity checklist in your toolkit. That's the key. So you can't just now say anything and everything. You're going to be actually refining it and testing it back to make sure that you haven't got jargon in there, that the imagery or colors don't imply something without proof. So this is all about refinement and getting real clarity, if you like. That's key. And it might be then that at stage five, you want to start thinking about partnering and media planning. There are other, obviously, platforms and partners who you can go with. The Anti-Greenwash Charter springs to mind, who are doing some great work in terms of, helping organizations prevent greenwash. And the output for this is some kind of media plan with documented sustainability checkpoints. So, sharing evidence with any partners who you decide to work with, any media stakeholders to avoid misrepresentation. The toolkit alignment here is transparency. This is what it's all about. And of course, if you can get some of the partners on board with certification, that is going to help you at this stage of the process. And then stage six is the governance and sign off. This is the bit where your campaign is going to look absolutely watertight if you've got cross-functional sign off, so marketing, legal, or some kind of ESG sustainability team, if that's applicable to you, and a sign off document that's been signed off by all. And so you've got an audit trail. So you began with a definition, you build some objectives, you went through your process, and you've created a campaign that now is good to go with the evidence backup and retaining campaign evidence files for any audits that might come through. So if you do get an audit or if somebody does challenge a particular claim you've made, you've always got those backup copies. It's all signed off, it's all in your audit trail, it's all carefully documented and saved safely in a folder for the future. And then stage seven, launch and monitoring. You take this thing out into the wild and you start to engage and watch what happened. The key for me here is obviously going to be tracking your key performance indicators. Yes, engagement. Yes, sales, but also cause related impact. So, actually, what happened? What were the differences that we made? How did people feel about this now, this campaign, differently to how they felt before? So, measuring the before and after is key. That's the exciting bit because then when you come to your real time dashboard, and of course, now most of us are doing that now because we've got AI to help us, we can be looking to measure and report back to our business both the commercial and the social impact of our campaign. Now, that to me is really, really exciting. That's the difference here because your organization doesn't just want social and it doesn't just want, even though it might think it does, it doesn't just want commercial, it wants a blend of both. So your dashboards now are going to be containing different things, these new layers, and maybe in the early days it's going to be a transparent layer that you're starting to fill in. It might not be that robust, but it will become robust as you go forward. So it's really kind of quite exciting. And then you can take the final stage, the stage 8 of your transparent campaign workflow back into the business. This is the evaluation and reporting stage. And of course, what you want is the transparency and the continuous improvement to come through in the results that you publish. And you can share your progress against the SDGs or some kind of ESG benchmark you might already have in there. And you can feed the learning into the next planning cycle, both strategic, longer term, and tactical, next campaign, so that your post campaign evaluation report includes transparent data. It includes the sustainability claims, but really importantly, it shows also what happened as a result of doing this, because it's all about the outcomes. Transparency in advertising and communications to avoid the greenwashing trap is all about the difference that this is making to your business, to your brand credentials, and actually how the world views your brand. Because, as the World Federation of Advertisers have said, transparency is not an optional extra, it's the foundation of trust. And we know that trust enables you to build a brand that's future proof. And that is why this is so, so important. So, by combining strategic frameworks, robust data, and of course, as I've been promoting it, the Cambridge Marketing College Sustainability Toolkit, you as a marketer, as a communicator, as a business professional can design campaigns and broader projects that are both transparent and credible at the same time as being future proof. And that is transparency in advertising. And hopefully, those steps, those workflows, that roadmap is going to help you to avoid the greenwashing trap.